The first spark. The scent of roasted chicken and rosemary hung heavy in the air, a comforting, familiar aroma that usually filled Elara with warmth. Tonight, it was tinged with a nervous anticipation that made her stomach flutter. She smoothed the skirt of her deep emerald dress, the fabric cool against her fingers, as she waited for the doorbell to chime. Liam was late, as usual, but Elara found a certain charm in his relaxed approach to time. It was a stark contrast to her own meticulous planning, and one of the many ways he broadened her perspective. When the chimes finally sang out, Elara practically flew to the door, her heart quickening. Liam stood on the porch, a mischievous grin playing on his lips, a small bouquet of wildflowers clutched in one hand. His dark hair was wind-tousled, and his eyes, the color of warm honey, sparkled with an irrepressible energy. "Apologies, my love," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble that always sent a shiver down her spine. "Got caught admiring a particularly stubborn sunset. Nature's a demanding mistress, you know." Elara laughed, a genuine, bubbling sound that surprised even herself. "Come in, you rogue." Ira's already setting the table, practically vibrating with curiosity. Liam stepped inside, his gaze sweeping around the cozy entryway, taking in the framed family photos and the scent of home. "Ah, the famous Lyra. I feel like I know her already, from all your stories." As if on cue, a whirlwind of motion descended the stairs. Lyra, her auburn hair a fiery halo around her expressive face, paused halfway down, her bright, inquisitive eyes locking onto Liam. She was wearing a simple denim dress, but her presence radiated an undeniable vitality. A wide, captivating smile spread across her features, mirroring Liam's own. "So, you're the elusive Liam," Lyra declared, bounding down the remaining steps. "Elara's talked my ear off about you." Liam chuckled, a rich, genuine sound. "And Elara's talked my ear off about her spirited younger sister. It's a pleasure to finally put a face to the legend." He extended the wildflowers to Lyra, a small offering for the gatekeeper. Lyra took them, her fingers brushing his, and a faint blush rose on her cheeks. "Oh, they're lovely. Thank you." She inhaled deeply, her eyes closing for a moment in appreciation. "Honeysuckle and wild rose. My favorites." Elara watched them, a warm glow spreading through her chest. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. Lyra, usually reserved with strangers, was already at ease, and Liam, with his effortless charm, was clearly delighted. Dinner unfolded with an easy grace. Liam, ever the storyteller, captivated Lyra with tales of his travels, a daring scramble up a treacherous mountain path in the Dolomites, a chance encounter with a reclusive artist in a dusty Moroccan bazaar. He spoke with such vivid detail, his hands animating his words, that Elara found herself transported, almost forgetting she'd heard many of these anecdotes before. Lyra, perched on the edge of her seat, hung on his every word, her laughter ringing out often and freely. "You have to tell her about the time you got lost in that ancient Roman catacomb," Elara prompted, a smile playing on her lips. She loved seeing Liam in his element, his eyes alight with the thrill of memory. Liam turned to Lyra, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "Ah yes, the catacombs. A true test of wits, and my sense of direction, which, I admit, is sometimes more aspirational than accurate." He launched into the story, painting a picture of echoing darkness, the smell of damp earth, and the sudden, heart-stopping realization of being utterly disoriented. Lyra gasped at the appropriate moments, her eyes wide with fascination, and when he described finding his way out by following a faint beam of light, she clapped her hands together. "That's incredible!" she exclaimed, her voice full of genuine awe. "You're so brave!" Liam shrugged modestly, though Elara could see the pleasure in his eyes. "More foolish than brave, perhaps. But it makes for a decent tale." As they cleared the table, Lyra and Liam fell into a natural rhythm, their movements mirroring each other as they stacked plates and wiped down the surfaces. Elara found herself on the periphery, a silent observer. A tiny, almost imperceptible pang pricked at her. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more a fleeting sense of displacement. She was happy, truly, to see them connect so easily. Lyra deserved someone who could bring such joy and adventure into her life. And Liam, with his boundless spirit, seemed to be just that person. But as Liam leaned closer to Lyra to whisper a joke, their shoulders brushing, and Lyra giggled, her hand coming up to playfully bat his arm, Elara felt a subtle shift in the air. A new energy, vibrant and undeniable, had entered her carefully constructed world. It was a spark, she realized, bright and unexpected, and for a reason she couldn't quite articulate, it made her feel a sudden, inexplicable chill. Whispers and worries. The weeks following the engagement party unfurled with a peculiar blend of sunshine and shadow. Liam, with his easy laugh and endless well of anecdotes, seamlessly integrated into the rhythm of Elara's life, or so it seemed. He and Lyra, however, began to form a different kind of pattern. "Just popping to the market for some ribbon, Elara," Lyra would call, already halfway out the door, Liam's shadow following hers. Or, "We're going to help Mrs. Gable with her prize-winning roses, then discuss the catering menu," Liam would explain, a hand casually resting on Lyra's arm as they departed. These errands and wedding planning sessions grew more frequent, extending beyond the usual timeframes. Elara, ever the pragmatist, initially dismissed her unease. Wedding planning was extensive, after all, and Liam's charismatic energy was infectious. Yet a subtle shift began to prickle at her. Lyra, usually a whirlwind of spontaneous gestures, started to adopt a calmer, more thoughtful posture, a slight tilt of her head mirroring Liam's as he listened intently. Her laughter, once a bright, unrestrained peal, now sometimes softened into a low, conspiratorial murmur when Liam shared a private joke. The air between them, once merely friendly, now hummed with an almost imperceptible current, a silent language of shared glances and knowing smiles. Elara found herself increasingly on the outside of these moments, an observer to a conversation she wasn't privy to. One crisp afternoon, a faint, metallic scent of autumn leaves already in the air, Elara was gathering herbs from the kitchen garden. The low hum of voices reached her from the rose arbor, a secluded spot just beyond the trellis. She recognized Liam's deeper tones, then Lyra's lighter, more urgent reply. Curiosity, a rare guest in Elara's usually tranquil mind, nudged her closer. She paused, concealed by the climbing roses, the rustle of the leaves masking her approach. "This isn't fair, Liam." Lyra's voice was strained, a raw edge to her usual composure. "She deserves more." Liam's response was soft, almost a whisper, yet carried a surprising intensity. "And what about what we deserve, Lyra? What about this feeling?" There was a pause, a weighty silence that stretched, punctuated only by the distant caw of a crow. "It's too much," Lyra finally said, her voice barely audible, yet laced with a desperate plea. I can't do this to her." Elara's breath caught in her throat. Her heart, which a moment ago had been beating a steady rhythm, now hammered against her ribs. What were they talking about? Oh. A sharp pang of fear, cold and unfamiliar, pierced through her. Was it about the wedding? Had something gone wrong with the arrangements she was unaware of? Liam's voice returned, firmer this time, laced with a persuasive charm that Elara recognized as his signature. "Think about it, Lyra. Really think. Are you truly happy living this way?" Before Lyra could answer, a twig snapped under Elara's foot. The conversation ceased abruptly, as if a record player had been yanked from its socket. A collective gasp, then silence. Elara forced herself to step out from behind the roses, a forced smile pasted on her lips. "Oh, there you are," she chirped, trying to sound casual, though her voice felt thin and reedy. "I was just wondering if you'd seen the garden shears. The basil needs trimming." Liam and Lyra stood frozen, their backs to her, Lyra's hand still clutched in Liam's. As they slowly turned, their faces were a study in masks. Liam's usual easy grin was absent, replaced by a strained, almost guilty expression. Lyra's vibrant eyes, usually alight with mischief, were wide and shadowed, her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. The air, which moments ago had crackled with unspoken words, was now thick with an awkward, heavy silence. The metallic scent of autumn leaves seemed to intensify, sharp and cold. "Shears?" Liam finally managed, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. "I think I saw them by the potting shed, Elara. We were just discussing the best variety of roses for the bridal bouquet. Lyra has such a discerning eye." He squeezed Lyra's hand almost imperceptibly, a gesture Elara hadn't missed. Lyra, still looking utterly shell-shocked, nodded mutely, her gaze flicking between Liam and Elara, a silent plea in her eyes that Elara couldn't decipher. Elara's smile remained fixed, but inside, a quiet dread had begun to unfurl its tendrils. The whispers had stopped, but the worries had just begun. A brush-off and a promise. The scent of rosemary and baking bread hung heavy in Elara's kitchen, a comforting aroma that usually settled her nerves. Not tonight. She watched Liam from across the island, his back to her as he meticulously sliced a baguette, the rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board echoing the frantic beat of her own heart. The silence, punctuated only by the soft scrape of ceramic on wood, stretched taut between them. "Liam?" she began, her voice a little too thin, a little too tentative. "Me." He paused, the knife resting on the cutting board, and turned, a warm, easy smile gracing his lips. "Everything all right, love?" Summers away. His eyes, the color of a summer sky, held a genuine concern that almost disarmed her. Almost. Elara twisted the linen napkin in her hands. "It's about Lyra." His smile faltered, just a fraction, before reforming. "Lyra? What about her?" He moved around the island, coming to stand beside her, his proximity a comfortable, familiar presence that tonight felt strangely suffocating. He reached for her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "Is she causing trouble?" "No, not trouble, exactly." Elara pulled her hand away gently, needing to maintain a sliver of distance, a mental buffer. "It's just you two seem to be spending a lot of time together. More than usual." The words, once spoken, felt clumsy, inadequate to convey the swirling unease in her gut. She thought of Lyra's lingering touch on Liam's arm the other day, the shared glances that seemed to hold a secret language. Liam's brow furrowed, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze before it smoothed over. "Is that what this is about?" He chuckled, a light, airy sound that grated on her already frayed nerves. "Elara, sweetheart, you're overthinking this. Lyra's just excited about the wedding. She's never had a big sister getting married before. She wants to be involved in everything." He leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed, confident. "She's been asking me about the guest list, the music, even the seating arrangements. She's just a whirlwind of bridal enthusiasm. You know how Lyra gets when she's passionate about something." He took a step closer, his hand coming to rest on her cheek, his touch warm and reassuring. "Besides, you've been so swamped with work lately. It's been nice to have someone to bounce ideas off, to help me with the little things you've been too busy for." Quote. Elara wanted to believe him. Desperately. She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deceit, but found only the familiar affection she had always cherished. Lyra was excitable, prone to throwing herself wholeheartedly into projects, and Elara had been particularly focused on her new marketing campaign. It made sense, didn't it? A logical explanation for the seemingly innocuous moments that had been chipping away at her peace of mind. "I suppose so," she mumbled, the tension in her shoulders easing a fraction. "It's just sometimes it feels like a bit much. Like she's taking over." The words hung in the air, revealing more of her insecurity than she had intended. Liam smiled, a knowing, indulgent expression. "She's just trying to help, love. You know she adores you. She'd never do anything to hurt you." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "And I'd never let her. You're my world, Elara. Always have been. Always will be." His words, soft and sincere, were a balm to her wounded spirit. She inhaled his familiar scent, a mix of pine and something uniquely Liam, and allowed herself to melt into his embrace. He was right. She was being paranoid. Lyra was her sister, her best friend. And Liam loved her. The thought was a comforting anchor in the choppy waters of her doubts. Yet, as she closed her eyes, a fleeting image surfaced. Lyra's head thrown back in laughter, Liam's hand resting briefly on her arm, a shared moment that felt too intimate for mere in-laws to be. The image shimmered at the edge of her consciousness, a tiny, persistent shard of glass in an otherwise smooth surface. She pushed it down, deep, deep down. She had to trust them. She had to. But even as she tried to banish it, a tiny, almost imperceptible seed of doubt had been planted, taking root in the fertile ground of her unspoken fears. The empty house. The oppressive heat of the late summer morning already seeped through the thin curtains, promising another sweltering day. Elara stirred. a vague unease prickling at the edges of her consciousness. It wasn't the heat that had disturbed her sleep, but an unfamiliar quiet. Lyra, usually an early riser even when not planning some elaborate morning activity, was conspicuously silent. Elara pushed herself up, the crisp white sheets tangling around her legs. A week. 1 week until the wedding. Her heart gave a little flutter of anticipation, quickly followed by a pang of something less joyful. Lyra had been acting strangely all week, a nervous energy thrumming beneath her usual vivacity. Little comments about the drudgery of domesticity, or the wild, untamed world beyond these walls, had punctuated their conversations, dismissed by Elara as pre-wedding jitters. But now, in the profound silence of the house, those words echoed with a sinister clarity. She padded barefoot across the cool wooden floor, her steps hushed in the empty hallway. Lyra's bedroom door was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, Elara's breath hitched. The room was immaculate, eerily so. The vibrant tapestry Lyra had hung over her bed was gone, the wall hooks starkly bare. Her small, worn leather trunk, a constant companion on all her adventures, was conspicuously absent. The air felt thin, stripped of Lyra's effervescent presence. A knot began to tighten in Elara's stomach, cold and hard. On the pillow, where Lyra usually tossed her discarded silk scarf, lay a folded piece of paper. Elara's fingers trembled as she picked it up. Lyra's looping, elegant script seemed to mock her with its beauty. Elara, I am so sorry. More than you can ever know. Please, try to understand. My heart chose a different path, one I couldn't ignore. This isn't fair to you, I know, but staying would have been a lie. Forgive me, if you ever can. Lyra. The words blurred through a sudden welling of tears. My heart chose a different path. The meaning was unmistakable, a punch to the gut that left her winded. It was Liam. It had to be Liam. The ease with which they had connected, the shared laughter that had often excluded her, the way Lyra's eyes had sparkled whenever he spoke of his travels. All the little seeds of doubt she had meticulously buried now burst forth, a thorny, suffocating vine. A desperate, primal scream clawed at her throat, but no sound escaped. Only a dry, ragged gasp. Her hands, still clutching the note, began to shake uncontrollably. She needed to know. She needed to hear him deny it, to tell her Lyra was mistaken, that this was some cruel, elaborate joke. Scrambling for her phone, Elara's fingers fumbled with the cold metal. Her vision was blurred, but she managed to tap Liam's contact. The phone rang once, twice, a hollow, echoing sound in the silent house. Then, a flat, robotic voice. The number you have dialed is not reachable. She tried again, a frantic, almost manic energy pulsing through her veins. The same message. Agains. Over and over. Each repetition a hammer blow against her rapidly disintegrating world. He was gone. They were both gone. Her fiancé, her sister. Taken by the same impulsive, restless spirit that had once drawn her to Liam, and that she had always adored in Lyra. Elara sank to the floor, the cold wood pressing into her bare skin, offering no comfort. The note slipped from her grasp, landing softly beside her. The house, once filled with the warmth of shared lives and future plans, now felt vast and cavernous, a tomb for her hopes. The silence pressed in, a heavy shroud. The only sound was the ragged rhythm of her own breathing, each gasp a testament to a betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter her completely. The wedding dress, hanging pristine in her closet, felt like a mocking white flag of surrender. A glimpse into the secret. The scent of lavender and Lyra's faint, sweet perfume still clung to the air in her sister's room, a cruel mockery of her absence. Elara stood in the doorway, her hand gripping the cold metal of the knob, a hollow ache where her heart used to be. Every object, every carefully placed trinket seemed to mock her with its familiarity, whispering of a life that had vanished without a trace. The pristine order of the room, so unlike Lyra's usual whirlwind, felt staged, a final, cruel performance. Her gaze swept over the vanity, the artfully arranged brushes, the half-empty bottle of Lyra's favorite rosewater. A small, intricately carved wooden box, usually overflowing with baubles, sat closed and solitary. Elara's fingers traced the cool, polished surface, a wave of profound sorrow washing over her. She picked up a silk scarf, Lyra's favorite, the one she'd worn on their last trip to the market. The fabric felt soft against her cheek, but instead of comfort, it brought only a fresh surge of tears. With a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of her soul, Elara began to search, though for what, she wasn't entirely sure. A note? A forgotten clue? They ran her hands beneath the pillows, through the drawers of the bedside table, her movements slow and methodical, each item a poignant reminder. Nothing. Just the mundane artifacts of a life abruptly abandoned. Discouraged, she sank onto the edge of the bed, her eyes falling upon the old, battered, leather-bound journal Lyra had kept since childhood. It usually sat proudly on her desk, a silent confidant to countless teenage woes and triumphs. But it wasn't there. A flicker of intuition, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at her. Lyra never moved her journal. Elara's eyes darted around the room, a new urgency propelling her. She checked the bookshelf, pushing aside a stack of novels. Nothing. Then, her gaze fell on the loose floorboard beneath the window, a secret cubby they'd discovered as children. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. There, nestled in the dusty hollow, was the journal, its familiar leather now looking somehow foreign, ominous. Her breath hitched. Lyra had never hidden it before. This was different. With a growing sense of dread, Elara pulled it out, the worn cover cool beneath her fingertips. She flipped through the first few pages, filled with childish drawings and innocent musings. Then, a more recent entry caught her eye, dated only weeks after Liam's arrival. Lyra's elegant script, usually so carefree, seemed to tremble on the page. Liam. The name itself feels like a song. I know it's wrong, so terribly, terribly wrong, but I can't stop thinking about him. His laugh, the way his eyes crinkle when he tells a story. He looks at me and it's like he truly sees me, not just Elara's little sister. Elara's world tilted. The air grew thin, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She kept reading, her eyes devouring each word, each sentence a stab to her already shattered heart. We talked for hours last night, under the old oak tree. He spoke of far-off lands, of sailing ships and undiscovered islands. And he looked at me, Elara's fiancé, and asked if I ever dreamed of more than this quiet life. My heart nearly burst. More entries followed, each one a testament to their burgeoning intimacy, their shared secrets. Lyra's guilt was woven through the lines, a faint thread of shame, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning, undeniable joy. He says we could go anywhere, start anew. A small cottage by the sea, perhaps, or a bustling city where no one knows our names. He sees the adventurer in me, the part I've kept hidden. We talked about building a life, a real life, free from expectations. Elara's vision blurred. A life. Their life. The plans Liam had so enthusiastically shared with her. The dreams of a future by the sea, of adventures together. They hadn't been hers at all. They had been Lyra's. Every shared glance, every lingering touch, every whispered promise had been a lie, a performance for her benefit. He kissed me. Under the moonlight, by the river, it felt like coming home. I know I'm betraying her, my own sister, but I can't stop. I don't want to stop. We'll leave soon. Start fresh. A new life, just us. The journal slipped from Elara's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The words, so vivid, so raw, echoed in the silent room. Her sister, her fiancé, gone. And in their wake, a truth so devastating, so utterly cruel, that it threatened to obliterate everything she thought she knew. The coded map. The scent of stale parchment and faded lavender clung to Lyra's journal, a bittersweet reminder of a sister Elara barely recognized anymore. Her fingers, still trembling from the raw emotion of the last entry, traced the delicate script. Lyra's careful penmanship, usually so precise, seemed to waver on this particular page, almost as if she'd been writing under duress. Elara's gaze snagged on a series of seemingly random letters scattered within a paragraph about wildflowers. Petal, stem, root, sun, soil, bloom. It sounded like a poetic musing, but something about the unnatural phrasing pricked at Elara's analytical mind. Lyra had always loved puzzles. Returning to the first page, Elara reread the dedication. To my dearest Elara, my North Star. North Star. A guide. A compass. The words in the wildflower paragraph suddenly clicked into place. Each word started with a letter, P, S, R, S, B. What if those were just placeholders? What if the real message was hidden within the number of letters in each word? Petal 5, stem 4, root 4, sun 3, soil 4, bloom 5. A sequence of numbers. With a fresh surge of adrenaline, Elara flipped back to the entry she'd been reading. She counted the words from the start of the page, then circled the 5th, then the 4th, then the 4th again. Her breath caught in her throat as the scattered letters began to coalesce, forming a crude but unmistakable message. Old map and attic chest. Cabin. The air in the quiet study seemed to thicken, pressing in on her. Lyra had left her a breadcrumb trail, a desperate plea perhaps, or a clue to their disappearance. The attic was a forgotten world of dust motes dancing in the slivers of light filtering through the grimy window. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs as she navigated the labyrinth of forgotten furniture and shrouded heirlooms. The chest, a heavy oak relic draped in a moth-eaten tapestry, sat tucked away in a shadowy corner. She wrestled with the rusted latch, her muscles burning with effort, until it finally creaked open with a groan that echoed in the stillness. Beneath yellowed linens and a bundle of dried roses she found it. Not a neatly folded, modern chart, but a brittle parchment map, the edges frayed with age. It was hand-drawn, the ink faded to sepia, depicting a winding path through jagged, unnamed peaks. A small, crudely drawn cabin was marked with an X, deep within a forested valley, far from any established roads. The coordinates, scrawled in Lyra's distinctive hand, were faint but legible. 38.74 degrees north, 109.91 degrees west. A quick search on her phone confirmed it. A remote area in the La Salle Mountains, far beyond any hiking trails she knew. An isolated, forgotten place. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Elara. Fear, cold and sharp, mingled with a burning anger she hadn't known she possessed. Lyra, her sister, had been planning something, hiding something. And Leo, the man she had loved, had been a part of it. The betrayal, sharp and bitter, solidified into a hard knot in her stomach. How could they? How could Lyra, her gentle, loving sister, be involved in such deceit? The decision, when it came, was not born of careful consideration, but of a deep, visceral need. She had to go. She had to find this cabin, follow Lyra's last, desperate clue. The idea of venturing into the desolate wilderness alone was terrifying, but the thought of living with the unanswered questions was far more so. She wouldn't let their betrayal fester unspoken. She would confront them, demand answers, even if it meant facing a truth she might not be ready for. A new resolve, fueled by the sting of deceit, hardened her gaze. She would go. She had to. The mountain journey. The earthy perfume of pine and damp soil clung to Elara as she secured the final strap of her pack. The cabin, a stark silhouette against the nascent sun, felt like both sanctuary and cage. Days blurred into a fog, the sharp edges of betrayal dulled to a constant throb beneath her ribs. Now the mountain beckoned, promising a different ache, yet perhaps a clearer perspective. She mentally ticked off her provisions: dried fruit, jerky, a small water flask, a hand-traced topographical map, and the worn, leather-bound journal she hoped held answers. Each item felt weighted, not just by its mass, but by the crushing burden of her desperate hope. The trail's initial ascent was deceptively gentle, a sinuous ribbon through a murmuring forest. Soon, however, the climb steepened, the ground growing treacherous with loose screed and exposed roots. Her calves burned, an accustomed pain usually tied to the satisfaction of a long trek, now intertwined with the gnawing void in her fractured heart. Each inhaled breath was a frigid bite to her lungs, yet she pressed on. Liam's easy laugh, Clara's radiant smile, intertwined and twisted in her mind, a venomous vine strangling all other thoughts. How could she have been so blind, so utterly trusting? The question echoed with every crunch of her boot on gravel. As the day waned, the sky, which had begun with an optimistic dawn flush, deepened to a bruised purple. A biting wind, carrying the first icy droplets, scoured the higher elevations. Her waterproof jacket, usually a comforting barrier, felt flimsy against the onslaught. She cinched the hood tighter, the fabric scraping her jaw, mirroring the raw irritation blooming within. The path became a treacherous ribbon of mud and slick rock, demanding her absolute focus. One misstep, and the journey, her quest for truth, would end. A sudden gust nearly brought her down. She braced herself against a gnarled juniper, its branches skeletal against the darkening horizon. The rain intensified, blurring the already indistinct trail. Doubt, a creeping chill, began to seep into her resolve. What if the cabin held nothing? What if this arduous trek led only to more emptiness, more questions? Her mind conjured images of the isolated dwelling, cold, silent, echoing with the absence of those she loved. The thought was a physical blow, stealing her breath. But then, a different image surfaced. Clara's handwriting in a letter, a casual mention of a remote cabin, a place for reflection. And Liam, his eyes alight with a shared secret, talking about a secluded spot he'd discovered. The pieces, once innocuous, now clicked into a chilling mosaic. They were connected, somehow, to that place, and to each other. A faint flicker of hope, though fragile, reignited, pushing back against the encroaching despair. She couldn't turn back, not now. Not when the truth, however painful, might be waiting just a few more miles away. Her muscles screamed in protest, each step a monumental effort. Her hands, numb with cold, gripped her walking sticks until her knuckles were white. The last vestiges of twilight bled into profound darkness, forcing her to rely on the feeble beam of her headlamp, which carved a small circle of visibility in the overwhelming blackness. The air grew thinner, sharper, carrying the scent of snow. She imagined them there, in that distant cabin, perhaps even now, laughing, oblivious to the storm raging in her heart, and on this unforgiving mountain. The thought, instead of deflating her, hardened her resolve. She would face them, or their ghosts, or whatever truth awaited her. This journey was more than just a physical ascent. It was a reckoning. With a renewed surge of stubborn determination, Elara took another weary step into the unforgiving night. The confession. The familiar scent of pine needles and damp earth grew stronger as Elara's worn boots crunched through the undergrowth. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the anxiety that had gnawed at her for weeks. The cabin, nestled deep within the whispering woods, finally came into view. Smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney, a domestic scene that felt utterly alien to her present reality. Through the grimy window, a tableau unfolded. Liam, his head thrown back in laughter, sat by the crackling fireplace, a mug cradled in his hands. Opposite him, Lyra's usually reserved features were alight, with a joy Elara hadn't seen in her sister in years. Lyra's hand rested lightly on Liam's arm, a gesture so intimate, so comfortable, it stole Elara's breath. They looked happy, content. A devastating calm settled over the scene, a stark contrast to the storm raging within Elara. A guttural cry tore from her throat, raw and uncontrolled. The cabin door, old and protesting, flew inward with a splintering crack. The sudden intrusion shattered the idyllic scene. Lyra gasped, her mug clattering to the floor. Liam, his face paling, slowly rose from his seat, his gaze locking with Elara's. A mixture of guilt and alarm etched into his features. "Elara," Liam managed, his voice barely a whisper. Elara didn't hear him. Her eyes, burning with unshed tears, were fixed on Lyra. "How could you?" she choked out, the words laced with a pain that felt too vast for her chest. "How could you, Lyra, after everything?" Lyra's defiant sparkle vanished, replaced by a tearful tremor. Her lower lip quivered. "Elara, I'm so sorry," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I never meant for this to happen. It just did." Her voice was muffled, thick with regret. "We couldn't help it. We tried to fight it, but I love him, Elara. I truly do." The last words were a whisper, barely audible above her trembling. "We were going to tell you. We're going to run away together, start somewhere new, where no one knew us, where we wouldn't hurt anyone." Quote, Elara stared, her mind struggling to process the confession. Run away? Her own sister? Her fiancé? The world tilted on its axis. Run away? She repeated, the words tasting like ash. And just leave everything behind? Leave me behind? Liam stepped forward, his expression grave. Elara, please, let us explain. He reached for her, but she recoiled as if burned. It's not what you think. Not entirely. He sighed, running a hand through his perpetually tousled hair. When I met you, Elara, I saw a kindness, a stability I desperately craved. And I still do. But with Lyra, He paused, searching for the right words, his gaze drifting to Lyra, who was now weeping silently. With Lyra, I found something else. A spark, an echo of the person I used to be. Before I became so predictable. She sees the world with a wildness, an untamed spirit that I thought I'd lost. It's like finding a lost piece of myself. His voice grew softer, laced with a bewildered honesty. She makes me feel alive, in a way I hadn't realized I'd stopped feeling. The air in the cabin grew heavy, thick with unspoken truths and shattered promises. Elara's vision blurred, the faces of her sister and the man she was supposed to marry melding into an unbearable image of betrayal. The warmth of the fire, the rustic charm of the cabin, all of it twisted into a cruel mockery of the life she thought she was building. Her world, once so carefully constructed, had crumbled into dust at their feet. A new path. The crisp morning air, usually a welcome caress, now raked Elara's skin like countless tiny needles. Each deliberate step away from the cabin deepened the chasm in her life. The familiar scent of pine, once a comfort, now carried a faint, acrid edge, as if something vital had scorched. She never looked back, leaving behind only the ashes of a meticulously constructed future. Liam's whispered excuses, Lyra's tear-streaked confessions. A discordant symphony of betrayal echoed in her mind. He didn't mean for this to happen, Elara. It just did. Their flimsy explanations scraped against her raw nerves. She'd always sought the best in people, even when glaring signs and gut-deep whispers cautioned otherwise. The late-night calls, the conspiratorial glances, the easy intimacy that had imperceptibly curdled from sisterly affection to something far more insidious, she'd dismissed them all. She had yearned to believe in the enduring strength of their bonds, in the unshakable loyalty she'd always extended, a jagged stone dug into her boot, a sharp, unwelcome anchor to the present moment. Her chest ached with a hollow throb, a pain unrelated to exertion, but born of a heart torn open by the shattering of trust. Liam, the man who had pledged forever, and Lyra, the sister meant to be her lifelong confidant, her mirror. The very bedrock of her world had conspired to crumble it, brick by painstaking brick. She thought of the dreams she'd woven around Liam. A small cottage draped in climbing roses, quiet evenings by the fire, children's laughter echoing through sunlit rooms. They had felt so vivid, so tangible. But as she walked, a different, more unsettling realization began to surface. Had those dreams truly been her own? Or merely a convenient template, a safe future she'd adopted? Her own aspirations, the vibrant art classes she'd always craved, the solo trip to Ireland she'd romanticized, the independent bookstore she'd envisioned, had slowly faded into muted tones, deemed impractical, or indefinitely deferred. Liam, theoretically supportive, had always prioritized his needs, their shared future. And Lyra, with her own restless energy, rarely encouraged Elara's quieter ambitions, often sweeping her into a whirlwind of spontaneous plans. As she emerged from the denser woods, the air lightened. The sun, a pale disk above the distant mountains, cast long, distorted shadows before her. A profound sense of loss still clung like a shroud, yet beneath it, a strange, nascent feeling began to stir. It was a tremor, a faint pulse of something new. Freedom. The weight of expectation, the burden of a shared future that no longer existed, lifted with each deliberate step. The path ahead was unwritten, unmarked. Terrifying uncertainty, yes, but also thrilling, terrifying potential. For so long, her identity had been inextricably intertwined with theirs. Liam's fiancé, Lyra's older sister. Now she was simply Elara, the betrayal, raw and agonizing, had unwittingly granted her an escape. It had demolished the cage she hadn't even realized she was in, a cage built of comfort and complacency. This wasn't the ending she'd envisioned, but perhaps, in its own brutal way, it was the beginning she desperately needed. She would grieve, she knew. The pain would linger. But as the cabin receded, a mere speck in the vast landscape, a peculiar resolve hardened within her. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was entirely her own. She would find her own colors, chase her own sun. She would rediscover Elara.